Welcome everyone to the Jim Boy Star podcast, and it is another Dragon Warrior / Quest special. This episode titled 3 Times the Dragon Warrior, and I have once again Pete, aka Kenshin 1913. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Well, I mean the cliffhanger from I Am a Dragon Warrior 2 was, will I do Dragon Warrior 3? And as you can see, it's happening.
Nice.
I know. If we're being fair, I think you gave me the hard sell at the end of the last one. Do you remember what you said to me?
Right. I was saying how, because I remember you said that you didn't really care for the third one. That wasn't your favorite. And I was like, and your favorite one's 4. So I was like, we got to get through 3 to get to 4. So it kind of only makes sense to do 3.
And then you remember, a few days after we recorded the show, that I sent you an email?
Mm-hmm.
And what did I say in that email? Not word for word, but roundabout.
You were pretty much like, you know what, you're sort of right. I think we should do it because I'm pretty pumped about doing 4. So we got to get through 3 in order to do that.
This being said, as I start getting reacquainted with 3, I'm not going to say it's still in the upper half, but I think I have grown a little more of an appreciation of 3.
Mm-hmm.
So before we do anything else, why don't you tell me, how many times have you Let's Played Dragon Warrior / Quest 3?
I think I've Let's Played it at least twice. And I've played it once for the NES, of course, and then once for the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom, which is the Super Nintendo, and that was like an upgraded version, an updated version. That one was really good, and I hopefully will do. I'm gonna do like they also have it for the Game Boy Color and the tablet or mobile device. So I'm gonna play the mobile device one a little bit just to show, the differences between that and the Game Boy Color and Super Famicom one, because those are basically both the same game.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done it. I've done it twice, but I hope to do it one more time, or not the whole game, but at least show some more videos, at least one more time.
So compared to Dragon Warrior / Quest 1 and 2, would you say that Dragon Warrior / Quest 3 has the least amount of differences compared to the other two that we've done already?
No. This game, the remake, actually has a lot of differences. I mean, it's still pretty much the basic story, basic gameplay, but they added in this game, or at least in Dragon Warrior 3, they have a class system where you can make different classes of characters. Mm-hmm. They add an extra class. They added this thing called the infinite bag, or like the bottomless bag, they call it, where you can pretty much take any spare items and put them in the bag, and you'll be set. I mean, you never run out of space, which is nice. They also added like a personality system, so it was a big difference between the NES version and those versions, and that's kind of why one of the reasons why I wanted to play it was because it was so different.
Mm-hmm. Let's expand a bit on something that you've just said. One of the biggest differences for this particular game compared to the first two is the class system. So let's talk about what exactly is the class system.
Well, in this game, or at least in Dragon Warrior 3, you could choose. You start off with the hero, which in this game, the first time, I think you can choose between male or female. Now in the NES version, it didn't really matter because it didn't change your sprite at all. Mm-hmm. But in the other versions, you actually see a male or a female character. So then, what you can do is, once you set off on your journey, and they tell you to go to the tavern to recruit, your buddies, you can choose between picking up to 8. Well, in the NES version, it's 7, and 8 in the Super Famicom, or the other ones afterwards. And you got different classes for, there's like a warrior or a soldier, and he's kind of like the tank. He can equip like all kinds of really amazing armor and weapons and stuff, but he doesn't have any spells. You got the fighter, the fighter who pretty much is like the fast attacker guy, and he's kind of like a kung fu master, so he doesn't use that many armor or even weapons. He's probably best barehanded. And then you have the cleric or the pilgrim, as they called it, and they use healing spells and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got the wizard who uses attack magic. You got the merchant who pretty much he's kind of almost useless in this game, but it's kind of neat because every time you defeat an enemy or every time you beat a battle, he'll end up picking up a little bit of gold for you every time. And actually, he also gets some interesting, like in the NES version, he doesn't have any spells, but in the I keep wanting to say Super Nintendo, but I'm just going to say the other following versions. He actually gets some interesting spells that you can use, and he can actually like call a shop, so you can kind of have a shop like if you're in the middle of a dungeon and you need like some items, you can call upon a shop and pick up like the basic stuff. And then you have the goof off or the jester, and that character again another very useless character. All right, most like a third of the time they won't even listen to what kind of commands you put in, and the only like plus side to those guys is that if you do level them up to level 20, you can turn them into the next class, which is a sage. Now a sage is a really awesome class that is a mixture between the wizard and the cleric or the pilgrim or whatever, and they pretty much learn their stats are pretty average. Their intelligence is really good and stuff like that, and they pretty much learn both sets of spells. So they're like an all-in-one kind of character. They're really really good. And then in the Super Nintendo and Game Boy Color and even the mobile version, they added a new class called the Thief, which they get some cool spells which you can use to like not have to deal with a lot of monsters. They also get they get the ability to occasionally steal from enemies when you beat them, so that's pretty cool. And thieves are pretty good too. So yeah, you get like 8 classes, and the nice thing about it too is you can pick male or female for either class, and the sprites are different depending on what one you do. So that was like a huge gave the game a lot of replayability because like you can you can pretty much choose whatever class you want.
Right. Now let me ask you this. When you start a Dragon Warrior game, just so we get an idea of your play style, what do you tend to start with of your group?
Well, with my group, I usually go with pretty much the characters that they give you. Like when you first go to the bar and they're like, "Oh, here you can pick your buddies." They pretty much have 3 characters that that they automatically give you. They give you the soldier or they give you the warrior, the cleric, and the wizard. And I usually go with those 3. Sometimes I'll switch up the soldier to have a fighter because the nice thing about a fighter is even though they don't have a lot of armor choices and they don't really get like weapons, they just pretty much use their fists or whatever. They're actually the fastest characters, and they're actually the ones that get the most critical hits. So sort of like Elena from Dragon Quest IV.
Sure.
She gets a lot of critical hits like as she levels up, and the fighter is one of those characters that usually gets a lot of critical hits. But for my Super Famicom or my Super Nintendo version, when I LP that game, I actually did a subscriber special, and I let people choose what characters they wanted to see me play as, and they ended up picking the merchant, the goof off, and a thief. So I pretty much had to do it with like one of the worst parties you could possibly do, and I ended up beating the game all the way through. But if I had to say like what one anyone should go with, they should probably go with like the the kind of standard warrior or fighter. You should have a healer and a wizard because that's probably the best group.
Which one of the two, since you did actually have a party that had both of these, the merchant and the goof off, which one did you think was the worst of the two?
I'd have to go with the goof off.
Okay.
Because during certain points, like hell, even during a boss battle, if you're like, okay, I really need the goof off to use this, let's say a healing item or whatever, and then they just fart around because there's all these different like commands that they do themselves, and like and they don't do it, and I get screwed because they don't use the healing item or whatever they're supposed to do. They're probably the worst
Mhm.
because it's almost like they're confused. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
whenever you get the confusion spell on you, and it's like that but worse.
I mean, it seems to remind me of like I'm trying to think in Dragon Warrior 4. I feel like in chapter 5,
Hmm.
Saloon kind of becomes that.
Yes,
Where
yes,
he
but
be-
he's a lot more useful in that fact. Where it's like most of the stuff that he does isn't actually that bad. Like
right, like he trips and falls and oh, it's a critical hit.
yes, yeah. See that's pretty good. But or like when he calls an army of merchants or whatever to come
Yeah.
attack, that's really good. But the goof off just ends up screwing you over. At least I'd say a third to a quarter of the time you put in your command, they'll do something totally different.
So what were your thoughts on the fact, like, so I think one of the reasons I maybe wasn't as big of a fan, it's weird because it's part of it, I think, has to do with the class system. Not that I hate the class system itself, but
Hmm.
I think I was used to having the people that, well, I mean, it is only the third game, but having the playable characters mean something to the story.
Hmm.
And in this case, it kind of takes that away from three of your four players, or
Right.
actually more, depending how many you wind up going. One of the other things I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this introduced that I didn't even realize was the day and night system,
Yes, it did.
which
It's,
I will always would have said it was Dragon Warrior 4 and, until I did the research and got reacquainted to this game.
hmm.
A welcome addition, I would say, right?
Yeah, oh, I really liked it because it gave you the opportunity to explore each town or castle or whatever at least twice because they actually in a lot of areas it would be a lot of different dialogue and it would be a lot of different scenarios. Like there's certain parts in the game where pretty early in the game where like let's say because this game also kind of well no the second game kind of did too, but you can pretty much steal stuff from the merchants, you know. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the merchants you hear about in this town that one of the merchants has like this really nice item that you want to get, and so during the day he's like up in his shop and he's like in the way pretty much. So when at night when he goes to sleep, you can actually steal the item from him. So that's pretty cool. Like obviously you wouldn't have been able to do that in two. And there's a couple scenarios where you have to actually go and visit certain objects or characters at night rather than in the morning. Otherwise, you can't continue with the story, which is kind of cool. And
Right.
yeah, it's a welcome addition because another thing about it, I believe they said that there are tougher monsters that come out at night, and it does seem like whenever you're in battle at night, there are different sets of monsters that you do fight versus in the morning or in
Mm-hmm.
in the daytime.
I believe also is the day and night system. I'm almost sure that the day and night system is carried all the way up until 9, which is the latest one as we're recording this. Although I know in overseas, I believe they already have Dragon Quest 10, but I
Hmm.
don't know anything about it. And I don't know if they have the day and night system, but just going by that, I believe it's carried all the way till 9, right? Day and
Yeah, I
night.
think so. The only game I'm thinking it's not in it is in six because that's like in two weird. It's
The
it's a
Dream
weird.
World,
There are
yeah.
two weird worlds there, and there. I don't think there ever is a night.
You
And
might,
I want to
you're
say
right.
five there is, but I can't recall off the top of my head if five has day and
I'm
night. I'm
almost
pretty
sure
sure
if
it
I'm
does.
sure it does. I think it does too because um you travel to
Oh
the
right,
haunted
yes, yeah.
house
In
in
the
the
very
night.
beginning of the
Yeah.
game, yes, you do travel around at night. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Mhm. Okay, so now we're gonna get to the plot, and I actually have to go check on something real quick. But why don't you start people off on I guess first off we know that this even though it's 3, this is
Hmm.
actually before the first 2. So why don't you
Right.
explain all that? I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, this game, just to get like a quick synopsis on the game and like where it comes from, it was in February 10th, 1988 is when it was released. I think in Japan, maybe not in America. But anyways, so this game is pretty amazing because it starts off with a really cool cutscene. Like once you start the game, there's this cool cutscene with a guy and he's fighting a dragon on top of a volcano, and they have a duel. And then what ends up happening is the guy wins, but he and the dragon end up falling into the volcano. So you start the story. You find out that guy is his name is Ortega, and he was this hero who was going to fight the Archfiend Baramos, who is like the evil bad guy in the world that you live in, and you're pretty much the Ortega's son or daughter, depending on who you are. You're Ortega's offspring, and it's your 16th birthday, and you're going to go visit the king. So when you get to the king pretty much just says, "Hey, you're the offspring of Ortega. You're probably a hero too. You gotta go and stop Baramos."
Right.
So what you do is he tells you to recruit a couple buddies or whatever, and go out and go explore the world and find out how to defeat Baramos.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much like the story, and it really gets fairly non-linear. Like after you get out of like the main town is called Alahan, and then there's the little world around it, and it's pretty much once you get off that island, it kind of gets a little less linear.
Right, and definitely compared to the other two. And again, this is one of those things where I was like, maybe this is why I need. Maybe I like the linear stuff. I don't know. Maybe that's just it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like having an idea where to go, and I feel like there's certain parts of this game where like you can get very lost. Most sort of like how when we talked last time about Dragon Quest II, and particularly about the orbs, I believe it was.
Yeah, the seals. You can definitely you can definitely get lost looking for those for sure. It can get very confusing finding them.
So one thing that I did not know or realize about this particular game until I did, and again, it's been years and years, especially this one. It's been years and years and years and years since I even looked at anything regarding this game before this episode. Apparently, so the names, it's kind of like the names of the towns that we're going to be talking about here is kind of corresponding with like real world stuff.
Right.
And the only one that I really might have put two and two together for that was a town by the name of Jai Peng.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I didn't really catch the other ones. But apparently there's like a town called like for Romilly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's like a couple of other ones. If you want to add any other ones, that's the
Right.
one I thought up top of my head.
Yeah, so the world is much bigger. In this game, Dragon Quest III, is the world map is even bigger than the 1 and 2. So if you thought 2 was big, 3 is even bigger. And what they ended up doing, they pretty much reversed or mirrored the world map of the globe, and then they just reversed it, and that's what I think that's how it is. It's sort of like literally like the world, which is kind of interesting. I never noticed it when I was a kid, but it's kind of interesting thinking about that. Like the hero is like from our world, which is kind of cool. So Alahan is pretty much Australia. Then so you got to do a bunch of stuff there. You get a thief's key, and you go into like this warp point, which is like Traveler's Gate, they call it.
Mm-hmm.
And you get warped over to this place called Romilly, which is pretty much Rome. It's pretty much Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to help out a king there. But yeah, so pretty much you go from Rome. You got to go all the way around. You pretty much go through like Russia, and there's this place, I forget the name of the town. But it's kind of like, you go to Portugal. That's where you get a ship.
Okay.
You go to Azaram, which is pretty much like in the desert. So it's kind of like Iraq kind of thing. And
Sure.
Japan, which is totally Japan, because you go in there, and it's the only town that has like different music,
Yeah.
which is really good music, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's got like all these little Asian guys, so it's like, yeah, this is totally Japan. And then you have to fight a monster there. It's kind of interesting. Like the storyline, I can kind of give it to you, but it's like like it doesn't have to be followed in any order, and
Right.
also there's like obviously little stories in between each area. So
So
I
I
mean,
don't.
I
I
don't
don't.
want to get that much into detail.
Right. Sure. I understand that. I mean, like the first though. I think you have to. I think you kind of touched on it a little bit. I think really the first overall mission is that you're supposed to find. I think you're supposed to find the keys, right?
Right.
Okay, and then let's talk a little bit. So where did you find? Where do you find these keys, and how did you go about it on your Let's Play? Do you recall at all, or no?
Well, pretty much like after you get like the thief's key and whatnot, you go through a set of adventures. You know, helping out in Romilly, you help out a king, and then which is pretty cool. You gotta get his crown back from this thief called Kandar. And the only reason why I'm mentioning this is because Kandar makes multiple appearances in this game, which is kind of cool. He's kind of like a recurring bad guy.
All right.
Probably one of the only ones that I remember from those old NES days where they actually had like a recurring bad guy you got to fight. And so you get back his crown, and then you have to go and help out these elves in the north, which is pretty interesting because in the north, like this was the first game that I ever remember. Like, there was a story between this guy who fell in love with this elf, and then they went and they both the town or both the groups didn't want them to get married or whatever, so they went to this cave and they ended up going on the bottom of the cave and they pretty much killed themselves, went under the
Ugh.
water. So you get there, you find this like letter or whatever that says that. And I remember the first time I played it, I was like, "Whoa, that's pretty crazy.
It's
That's
pretty
pretty
dark.
dark.
Yeah.
It's very dark." So you help out the elves, and then they help restore one of the towns, and then finally you go to I believe the name of the town was Azaram, as I said, and you learn about the magic key that you have to go get, and you have to go to this castle called Isis, and pretty much it's run by a queen,
Mhm.
and you know she's obviously Cleopatra because she's like this, or not obviously, but she's like sort of like a Cleopatra like person, and she tells you like, oh, she's so beautiful, this, that, and the other, and so she tells you that the key is actually in the pyramids to the north, which is also pretty cool because it's the first time like you see a different type of like it's always been like, oh, you go into caves, you go into towers and stuff. This was like a totally different area,
Right.
which was really cool, and it was filled with all kinds of traps. And so you get the magic key there, and then finally you go through there. You got to get black pepper. Or you get black pepper from this town called what is it called?
Do you mean the port city?
Yeah, you pretty much when you get the magic key, you're able to access Portuga, which is Portugal, and that's where like all the ships are at. But you can't get a ship until you get some pepper
Mhm.
for the king, which is sort of like Marco Polo. I mean, he kind of brought spices from
Right.
the new world or whatever
Sure, you
the
are your source of historical references right
right,
there.
right, right. So pretty much you gotta go eat yeah, you gotta go east, and you head over to a town called Baharata,
So
which is
yeah, what's that equivalent to in our world?
I think it's somewhere in India, and because there's a big river that everybody's washing themselves
Oh,
in.
like the Nile?
Yeah,
Was that
whatever
what that's
the
what they?
Ganges or something
No,
like that.
maybe
I
the
think they.
Ganges. I don't know. I'm not good at geography, but I know
Yeah,
what you're getting
I
at.
think it's the Ganges. Anyway, so everybody's washing themselves in there, and you go to the town. You're like, hey, I need some
Wait,
black
time out,
pepper.
time out. What was that? Did you say everyone was washing themselves?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of villagers on the bottom near the river, and they're like, oh, we always bathe in here. It's a magical. It's a
Wow.
holy river. Blah blah
Public
blah.
bathing. All right.
So you go to the town. You find out that you need pepper. You ask them about pepper. They don't have any, and pretty much the guy who sells it, his daughter's missing, and you have to go save his daughter. And guess what? Kandar once again. So you got to deal with him.
So yeah, so
And every
Kandar stole the daughter too. So after he wait,
so
what did he do?
after
Yeah.
oh,
What?
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just trying to. I'm see now. I'm just gonna try to figure out the Kandar timeline.
Yeah.
So what
So
did he start? He
after
started to do first. He stole the king's crown. So
right.
then you beat him up, and then he's like, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna steal this guy's daughter."
Right. He's like, no, I won't steal anymore. And then boom, you find him again. He's stealing. He's being a jerk, and you got to fight him again.
Right.
And
Okay.
so, and then he gives you another ultimatum, like, oh, I won't. Another but thou must moment where he's like, I won't ever steal again. Blah blah blah. And you're like, oh, okay, whatever. So you go, you rescue the daughter, and you get the pepper. Now the world opens up because you get the boat. So after you get the boat,
Yeah, things get more confusing on where to go if now that you have the
yes,
boat.
things get a lot more confusing, especially because it's like, all right, I'm going around collecting keys and trying to figure out. So right south from the Portoga, you find this dude who lives in a lighthouse who said, if you collect these orbs, you'll be able to go anywhere in the world without a boat. So that like really was like, oh my God. Like the first time I got there, I was like, whoa,
Mm,
really? Because, all I knew at that point was a boat. Because the
right.
first two game, the first game didn't have anything, and then the second game had a boat, and I was like, okay, you need a boat. So, yeah, that's the only thing. So
Mm.
you sail the world. You kind of do a couple more quests, like in Japan.
Yeah, let's
You
talk
pretty
about this one, please. I'd like to
yeah.
talk about the Jaipang quest.
So so eventually you're sailing around picking up orbs, and you go to Japan, and what does that end up happening is there's this monster Orochi who is terrifying the village by eating maidens who are being sacrificed to Orochi. So what ends up happening is you're like, okay, we'll handle this. You go to the cave that is close there where supposedly Orochi's there,
Right.
and you find Orochi and you beat him,
Mm.
but it warps back to wherever the heck it goes, and then you find out that pretty much the leader of the village of Japan was Orochi. So you have to fight it a second time, and then eventually you get a orb from that quest.
Right. Now let's talk about and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm misremembering, but I recall you having a hard time with Orochi.
Yeah, Orochi was pretty tough. In the
What makes him
NES
so
version,
tough? What makes him tough? Do you know?
what makes him tough is the fact that I believe he gets multiple attacks, and which I mean I can't fault bosses for. I mean if
Right.
it's 4-on-1, but he gets like these multiple fire breathing attacks, which can be really really difficult.
Mm.
And if you don't have like a heal, like a multi heal spell or something like that, it can get really difficult on who to prioritize on who to heal.
Mm.
And he can tack pretty good too. But he does leave a great sword behind after he dies, the Orochi sword, which decreases enemies' defense, which is really really nice. And you can use that in the battle against him for the second time, and it makes it a lot easier.
Okay. So another question. So I know that. So after you beat Orochi the first time, wherever he was in whatever cave it is, then you get kind of back into the town or Jaipeng.
Hmm.
Don't they ask you yeah, like will you keep my secret, yes or no? Is that another you must choose this, or can you choose the other thing?
You can choose to keep the secret, but in the end, you pretty much have to say no so you can fight it again.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Uh,
And yeah, you got to fight the leader of the village, whose name is Himiko, and she really is Orochi. Although apparently in the super,
Wait a minute,
the
time out. Now I'm really getting confused here. Hold on. So
yeah,
that's hashtag who is Orochi?
yeah,
No, because
Orochi apparently is a like a multi-head dragon,
right.
and it is like a legend in Japanese lore, or whatever, where he pretty much terrorized Japan or some town, I forget exactly where, and he wanted maidens to be sacrificed and all that, and then eventually like a hero did end up stopping him. I think it's Susano.
Right.
Anyways, that's besides the point. You pretty much find out that it's Himiko pretty much, and in the Super Famicom version, Himiko was actually a real she was really the lady who ruled the town, but she ended up getting killed one night, and Orochi pretty much took her form.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I got it now. All right.
yeah. See, they were able to add extra story in the other versions that you weren't. I guess they weren't able to add in to the NES
Yeah,
version.
because I don't remember Hamiki. I remember the name, but I didn't remember too much of like having much to do with anything.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, other than that, and given the orb, they don't really have a lot to do with what's going on in the world.
which it should be noted now that at this point that's what we're doing is we're kind of looking for orbs again. We're back at this little task, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about orb hunting. I think feel like we had a lot of interesting things to say about our last orb hunt, but I don't remember too much of them off the top of my head.
Right.
How many
Well, at
orbs
least
are there?
this one is kind of similar in the essence of you get another flute, the echoing flute, which you can use to locate the orbs if it echoes. Pretty much, there's an orb around, which is really really helpful.
Right.
But and also all around. I mean, not that they didn't do in Dragon Quest II, but they do a better job in this game to kind of tell you where orbs are. Like NPCs kind of like tell you where they are. Well, at least give you hints, more or better hints to tell you where they are, which is really nice.
Right. Well, I remember that was one of the big discussions on how hard it is to actually find those orbs. So let's why don't we do this? And because like you said, the story is kind of like it's an open world. Why don't we focus on these orbs? Now we have one that we got from Jaipeng. Where are the let's go because by doing that, we'll be able to talk about some of these other towns.
Right.
Although I think we might have, I think we already mentioned another orb, but I don't. Was it Portigo?
No, we ended up getting our ship there.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're only got at one orb right now. So let's go through where the other orb is, or the other orbs.
Right.
How many are there again? Are there more or less?
I believe there are 6.
Is that more or less than than 2? I don't remember.
I think it's 1 extra more. Yeah, it's 1 extra more because you gotta get 5 seals.
All right. So where's our next orb take us?
So so the first orb, I forget. I think if I can remember the colors, that'd be good. Purple, I think, is a Orochi. Then you go to a town in trying to think of where it is. Oh, okay. So you go to like this pirates hideaway. You find like a band of legendary pirates or a band of pirates, and you find out that there's an orb there. So you have to go back at night. Pretty much the nice thing about the day-night system is, you go in the morning, night, and you talk to people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got a lot of treasure," and then you have to go back in the morning if you want, and you get to talk to a guy who's like, "Oh yeah, they stolen these guys." Looted an orb, so you get the red orb from the pirates, right?
Okay.
Then the next place you get an orb is this place called, oh boy, I forget the name of it, but it's pretty much like Gaia's navel. So pretty much what you have to do is you go through this town, and you have to go through a cave by yourself. Whichever character's in the lead goes through the cave.
Oh, it doesn't have to be the. And
in that cave you get the green orb.
It doesn't have to be.
Oh no, it doesn't have to be the hero. Whoever's
that's
in the
weird
in the
to
front.
me. I feel like it should always have to be your main character, like a kind of like a trial thing. That's very weird to me that it doesn't have to be your main hero.
Well, whoever's in front, and usually you would probably want your main hero because they're pretty balanced, and I mean you can use healing spells and stuff like that. So they're usually fairly good. And in there, you get the green orb.
All right.
And then the next orb that you get is in a town that you have to start, right? So this is a cool little thing that they started in this game. Similar to, I don't know if you ever played 7, but it's kind of like the immigrant town where you have to like recruit people to go into your town and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember 7 for that. Yeah, that was led by Sim. If I can recall, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is you have to take a merchant over to this spot, which is pretty much New York City, and you talk to this guy, and the guy's like, man, if I had a merchant here, I'd love to make a city around here. So you bring a merchant, and then after you collect every orb, you go back to the town, or after you do every if you do something in a town, like a major thing in a town, you go and you do like you go over there, and pretty much it keeps building up and up and up until the town is really big, but people are really pissed off at your merchant because he's treating everybody like slaves because he wants to keep building and building and building, and eventually there's a revolt, and they put
Oh
your merchant guy in jail. So your merchant guy's like, oh man, it's a shame. I didn't want the town to turn into this, and he's like, but I hid an orb that I found, behind the my throne or whatever. So you go back
right.
there, you get that, and that is the yellow orb.
I don't know why he wouldn't have told you on one of your other trips before he got thrown in jail.
Right.
He clearly knew, he or she, I guess depending on what gender character you chose, they clearly knew that you were on the search for orbs.
Exactly.
Why wouldn't you say? Does Kandar have one? I think that's the thing I'm trying to remember the most now.
No, I don't think he
Now,
did.
Kandar steals crowns and I guess daughters, but not orbs. Is that Kandar's MO there?
Yeah.
So what do we have? We have 4 orbs at this point?
Yes. Well, we got, yeah. And I'm just trying to remember where the other 2. One of them is the yellow orb, the blue orb. There's a silver orb, but that's the last one you get. Sort of like
I think
when
I
you
remember.
go to...
If you're having trouble remembering, I think I remember where the one that you're missing is, but I don't know the town.
Right,
It's
right.
the ghost town.
Oh, yes. So at that point, yeah, day and night again, good system. Once you get your town and you travel south, you travel to this town called what is the name of that town? I can't remember that. Tanaki. There we go.
Okay.
And it's pretty much like I think it's probably like an African town because it's
Right.
kind of like west of Egypt. So I guess it would technically be like somewhere in Africa. Anyways, the town is pretty much a ghost town. And what you have to do is get the last key in order to open up this thing, because you find out, you talk to all these people when you're at night, and then you go to sleep or whatever, and you go back in there during the day, and no one is there. And you're like, what the hell is going on? And you go look in the prison where there was a prisoner, and he wrote on the wall, if only I could have given the orb to someone while I was alive. So what you have to do is get you the final key, which is like, it's a little bit of I don't really want to go into it just because, just to save some time. But
Sure.
You go to a town, you get a thing, and then you finally get the final key. And then you get this orb, and you get it from the prisoner if you go back at night and you talk to him while he's quote-unquote alive, even though he's not really.
Right.
And you get the orb that way. So that one is the... what orb is that? That's the green one. And I think I mixed up the blue orb.
Because you definitely said green before.
Yeah, so this is the green orb, and the blue orb is the one you get when you go solo into that one cave.
Okay.
So the final orb that you get, you have to get it, and pretty much sort of like in Dragon Quest II, where you have to go and get the life crest in the Road to Rhone and then leave. You pretty much have to go to this place. It's called the Necroground.
Okay.
Right? And that's pretty much where Baramos is, near there. And the only way you can get there is if you make the volcano where your dad fell into explode and get that thing going. And so what you have to do in order to get that going, which is another little quest in itself, is you got to get this sword. And there's this really cool scene in this game where you find out about a ghost ship, and you have to go on this ghost ship, and you get something there so that you can go get the sword that you got to use to throw into the volcano. And there's this really cool scene that they do where you're trying to go through this little cape or this little river area, and you can't go through it because the ghost of the lady, one of the ghosts stops you from the ghost ship or whatever. So you have to use because there were 2 people who were in love, Olivia and someone else. Anyways, you end up resolving that, and then you can finally get the sword, and that you got to throw into the volcano, which is called the Sword of Gaia. So you do that. You go into the Necroground. It's pretty much like the Road to Rhone because it's really, really hard, and it's really, really you really get confused there. So eventually you get to the end. You get the silver orb, and you're like, "Woo! Now we gotta go."
You have all of them now.
Yeah, you gotta go over. There is a spot called I don't think it's called Greenland, but there's an area in the game where it's full of ice, except for a little shrine that's in the middle over there. So you go into the shrine and you see these 2 elves or fairies or whatever they are, And they're like, yeah, you gotta use these orbs and these things, and they pretty much light up or whatever. And you pretty much in the middle hatch an egg, which is Ramia, the god bird, and she pretty much gives you the ability to fly all around the world without having to use a boat.
Well, that seems like that should be much easier then.
Right, exactly. And it's really amazing because this is the first time in in Final Fantasy they've always had airships. But this is like really, really awesome. I really love the Ramia theme. It's hands down one of my favorite themes of all the Dragon Quest one of the Dragon Quest flying scene themes.
Right.
So you get Ramia. Now you can fly over to where Baramos is because he's on an island, and he's in a castle on an island that's surrounded by mountains.
Mm.
So you go over there, you find Baramos, and you beat him up. You defeat him. You're like, woohoo, game over. We did it.
We took revenge for his victims in that ghost town, because that's why they're ghosts.
Right, exactly. And we even though Ortega didn't get to defeat Baramos, we did it anyways.
Yes.
So you go back to the castle. You tell the king, yeah, I beat Baramos. We're the best. Yeah. And then a big old twist happens. Pretty much you find out that Baramos was just like a minion to this really nasty guy called Zoma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the first times I've ever seen this happen, like in an earlier video game like that, where you're like, oh man, I beat the game. This is going to be awesome. Because you think classic Dragon Warrior style, you get to explore the world, see how everybody's doing and whatnot. And then they're like, nope, turn it on your head. There's another world you got to explore.
It was, if I can remember correctly, it was to a smaller scale for Dragon Quest 2.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Because you're like, okay, I beat Hargon, now let me get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ended up being what's his name, Malroth.
Yeah.
So you find out Zoma is in the world underneath your world, which is weird. So you go to a spot where you can fall into the next world, which is near where Baramos' castle is.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out that you're in the Dark World, which is Alfgard.
No, great.
Which is amazing because you're like, oh my god, I know this area. I know this well. But when you go into the world, you find out that everything is a little bit different than what you remember from the first two games.
Right.
And the reason being is because as you talk to people, you find out, if you've played the other two games, of course, that you're really in the past because certain things have not happened yet in this game that will eventually happen. So when you're down in Alfgard, you find out that you have to defeat Zoma, and what you have to do is also you find out that your dad is still alive, and he came down here, and you're like, oh, I couldn't believe he's still alive. Shit.
Yeah, I wonder how much time has gone by. That was my
exactly. That's one question I've always wondered too, like how much time between the beginning of your quest, or between Ortega and the beginning of your quest and all that. But anyway, so you have to collect items that. Sorry. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, because I feel like like you mentioned, he says it's the world what did you say? It's the world below the world or something like that's the description. Yeah. So that makes me think it's kind of like an underworld kind of situation.
Yeah, it kind of is.
I'm wondering if time just doesn't move in this particular in this particular world.
Right now, I can see that.
Right now, maybe. Well, when we get to the end, we'll talk more about that, I'm sure.
Right. So what you have to do is pretty much just similar to what you had to do in Dragon Warrior 1. Is you had to collect this legendary equipment and all these things to help defeat Zoma. So you have to get the Sword of Kings. You've got to get the shield. I forget what it's called. I think the Shield of Heroes or something like that. Anyways, you just pretty much have to collect an armor, a shield, and a sword. So you get this. Another really cool thing about this game is you get this cool. You get this thing where you pick up the gear, because Zoma, you heard he destroyed the sword, so you can't get that back.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find what the sword was made of, and then you sell it to a guy who used to live in Japan, but now he lives down in the underworld
How
somehow.
did he get there? I have no
I don't
idea.
know. Apparently, they said that people used to go to that hole and then just go jump down it, and apparently they didn't die, so they're down there.
If all of a sudden I'm here in northern New Jersey,
Right.
and in Jersey City, which is the town next to me, I'm like, all of a sudden a giant hole appears. There's no way I'm jumping down that hole.
Yeah, it's weird. I wouldn't jump down that hole either. I mean, even if you were depressed, no way. And then to find out that there's another world down there, it's like, whoa, no, thank you.
A possible underworld, which is the theory right now for me.
Yeah. So what you have to do is give him the pretty much you can find the material that the sword was made of, and you sell it to him, and then you can actually purchase the sword through his thing, because apparently he was like a blacksmith or something. So you get the sword, you go into a cave, which used to be Erdrick's cave. I mean, obviously it's not at this point, and it's full of monsters, so it's pretty weird, because you're usually like, okay, this place is empty, there's no one in here. And it's full of really dangerous monsters, and you can't even use spells, which is kind of tricky.
Wow,
you get your shield, and then you leave, and then let me see what else. A couple other things you have to do. You get the armor from up in this tower. It's called the Tower of Rubius, because Zoma ended up sealing Rubius away, so you end up helping her.
Mm-hmm.
And she gives you this sacred amulet, which turns into Erdrick's, which eventually turns into Erdrick's, locket or amulet or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, after you collect everything, by this point you should have the Stones of Sunlight and the Staff of Rain. And then you use that to make a rainbow bridge to go visit Zoma's castle, because he is in the same area that the Dragon Lord is in. And then one other thing that they talk about in Alfgard is that Zoma is like afraid of this item, but it's located up in the world above. Okay. So you have to go back, and when you visit towns, obviously you get the return spell, and you can return from one town to the other. So like, don't think when you go into the Alfgard that like you can't go back. You can go back.
Right. You're the only one that has a well, I guess it's not Zoom at this point. It's a return spell, right? Okay. Yeah. Only you have a return spell. That guy from Jaipeng cannot cast return and go back to Jaipeng.
No, he can't. No,
by the way, real quick theory, the more I'm thinking about this, so I'm thinking now, this guy from Jaipeng was like, you know what, fuck it. Here's this hole. You know what, anything's gotta be better than dealing with Orochi. Let me fucking jump down this to get away.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking that might
I
have been...
I can totally see that.
Now it might make a little more sense with this theory.
Right.
Not whoever created the game, but I want to see... I wish that I can get in contact and say, was that the plan for the guy from Jaipeng?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask someone that created this game. All right, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, that would be. It does sound like a good idea, because there's actually one other character that's down here, and pretty much it's Kandar. You find Kandar down. Again. How did he get down there? I don't know.
Here's what I'm thinking. Okay, I figured it out. So people jump down this hole because it's basically equivalent to suicide. They are like, right. We don't know what's going to happen. We're probably going to die. Kandar has failed at pretty much all his things that he was doing. There's no coming back for him as far as being a trustworthy human being. So he jumps down the hole. The guy from Jaipeng, on the other hand, he's faced with depression, and he's like, I have no family because Orochi ate them all, and I have nothing else to live for. Let me jump in this hole. That's what I think why people are down there. Anyone that you see from the overworld down here either jump because they were depressed or they were just, quite frankly, looking to end it all.
Yeah. Or there was no other option, and they're like, let's get I don't care what's down there, I'm done.
Right.
But yeah, so Kandar's down there, and I think he gives you some pretty good advice too, like something about like if you search behind the Zoma's what the hell is it? His throne, you can pretty much find, like, you can go downstairs or whatever. Similar to whoever told you that in the first game about the Dragon Lord.
Right.
So we have to go back to the overworld where we find this Dragon Queen. She lives in a castle that you can't reach to unless you use Ramya. Anyways, you get this. She's pretty much on her deathbed, and she gives you the sphere of light, which you have to use in order to defeat Zoma. Otherwise, he's really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this sphere of light. You can do it without it, but it's pretty difficult. So you get the sphere of light. You go back down over the Rainbow Bridge into Zoma's castle. You get down, and then you meet a guy who's fighting this big old monster. And you find out that guy is actually your dad. And what ends up happening is he ends up getting killed by the monster. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I apologize for that. But he ends up getting killed by this guy, and you kind of just stand there, like watching him get killed. And I wish in that point you could jump in. So, anyways, you find out that this guy is actually Ortega, your father, and he was killed by one of Zoma's monsters. And sadly, you can't revive him. It's a nice scene because you finally get to meet your pop, but it's just a little too late. And he says, if you ever run into my son or daughter or, my offspring, tell him, to be brave or whatever. I forget exactly what. So after seeing your father die.
I'm surprised that we wouldn't say that, hey, it's me, and give the poor guy some closure that he knows that his message was sent.
Yeah. Well, I wish you could have, but I guess since we're silent protagonists, we never have anything to say. And so we finally get down to the bottom of the castle. We meet Zoma. We have to fight a couple of his goons. And we get there, and he pretty much has a barrier on him, like an evil barrier, which you have to use the sphere of light, which cuts his speed and his... I think it's his speed and his attack power or his defense or something in half. So, and it also makes him change colors. So then after that, you can pretty much defeat him. So after you defeat Zoma, finally, after this big old battle and everything, you go back up into the castle, out of Zoma's castle, and you find out that the hole that you fell into closes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns light. It turns into light. So you're probably right about, like, time stopped.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Because Ortega would have gotten way older, too.
Right. And so that's, like, a sad moment for me because I feel like, man, the hero will never be able to go back up to his old world and, like, see his mom or even his grandpa or anybody up there ever again, which kind of sucks.
He's possibly the only one that actually went to this world by choice, because even Ortega didn't go by choice. He kind of fell. And then, like I said, the guy from Jaipang, and we already have our theories for that, and Kandar. So, no, it is a bit sad. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in typical Dragon Warrior fashion, you can go around talking to everybody in the world, or at least everybody in Alfgard. And then you pretty much go to the king, and the king gives you the title of Erdrick. So pretty much it's a wrap around, and you find out that you're actually playing as Erdrick, and you're the hero, and you'll have descendants. So pretty, and they'll do Dragon Warrior 1, Dragon Warrior 2. So it's kind of cool. And so the hero, eventually vanishes from Alfgard and leaves his stuff down to be passed to, like, the generations or whatever. And that's pretty much how the game ends. And so, like, when they talk about, like, the hero had 3 buddies, they were talking about the 3 buddies who come with you on this journey the whole way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So.
And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. But yeah, so it goes in the order of storyline. It goes 3, 1, and then 2.
Mm-hmm. So now I'm wrapping my head around the fact that, and we knew going into this that this was a, all the first 3 were in its own trilogy or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, no mention of any lockets, by the way, in your description of the story. Remember how we were joking last time about being the Locket trilogy?
No, right.
I don't think there were any lockets in this one, unfortunately.
You do get the amulet. I don't know if I'd call that a locket. You get a locket to save the ghosts, the 2 ghosts that were... That's not really...
I mean, it's not major, not like the other 2, but you use it for something. So I don't know. I mean, I'm wrapping my head around that. Really, for the first 2 games, we might have been playing in some form of an underworld. I've got that in my mind now. I also have in my mind that maybe here in the United States, if there's a hole that does appear, maybe if I do jump down it, it will bring me to Alfgard.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because of the similarities between our real life world and what they like, Japan and Jaipang and all those other
Yeah.
ones. I don't know. Although I don't know if I'd want to. I don't think I'd jump down it because ultimately there's a lot of threatening things happening over the course of the years in Alfgard. So
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't want to go down there either.
what do you think of the whole theory? Is it an underworld or do you have your
I
own
think it's an
theories?
underworld. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting on how they made it because I don't know. It just seems weird that there's a world on top of the world. Like it's kind of cool to think about, but it'd be like, ugh, I wouldn't go down there. Especially
Right.
like if you think about it, after that, it's always sunny. It's always daytime in the world of Alfgard.
Right.
So it would be weird. It'd almost be like Alaska, where you'd go and be like 6 months a day, it's 6 months a night.
Well, hey, if they put in some red tint, then I'll get my. I watch a show called Once Upon a Time, and this
Hmm.
season they're in the underworld. Let's just have red tint the whole time because that's what they're doing. They're using the exact same set, except
Yeah.
it's red tint and we're in the underworld. That's
Yeah.
Alfgard. I want to see if they bring Alfgard back again. I want to see red tint all around.
Oh yeah.
So what are your overall thoughts on this game
Well,
for you?
I think it's really good. Interestingly enough, I just wanted to quickly go over like for the updated versions, not the NES versions, they actually added some really interesting special features.
Okay.
Like one thing is they have this like bonus dungeon that you can go to, and it's like a tower, almost like the Zenithian Tower from 4 and so on.
Hmm.
And you go up there and you fight a dragon, and if you beat the dragon in so many turns, you can get a wish. And one of the wishes is actually to bring back Ortega, which is really cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he ends up hanging out with your mom back in Alahan, so you can kind of. There's nothing
Wait a
really.
minute. Okay, see now there's a problem here.
Yeah,
Because how did they get back now? Or is there like additional scenes now? Because this is an expansion, I guess, in a way.
yeah, because they have a bonus dungeon, which makes me think that the games are almost connected because there's another thing. There's a theory going around like when the Dragon Queen dies, the one she's from the above world, when
Yes.
she ends up dying, she leaves an egg, right?
Hmm.
And in the Super Famicom version, that egg looks like the egg from Dragon Quest 6. Like and
Okay.
he and so there's some theories that egg, the Dragon Queen's castle, eventually becomes Zenithian Castle, right?
Sure. That okay. I can see
And
that.
that dragon eventually is like the leader of Zenithia.
Oh, the one you see on 4?
Yeah, the one you would meet in 4 and 5 and 6.
Well, 5. Oh, wait, he turns into the dragon, I believe, in 5.
Right, yes.
He's not the dragon yet, and then 4 he's full-fledged dragon. So 4, 5, and 6 would actually go then 6, 5, 4.
Yeah, 6 is a prequel to 4 and 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good theory. I like it.
That's
I
the
would go with
theory
that.
that I have and a couple other people that I know have, and like I've seen a community of people think that that might be a way that connects the two trilogies together. And then a lot of people think that egg might actually be the Dragon Lord, but I have no idea
I
how
don't
that
know.
egg will eventually go down into the
Right.
underworld and become the Dragon Lord.
I don't think I buy that one as much as your egg turns into the Zenithian dragon.
Yeah, because that town, pretty much in that castle, you go through the dungeon and then you're in Zenithia. That's in the bonus dungeon stuff in the third game. Or in the updated ones, like the Super Famicom, even the Game Boy Color and the
Right.
tablet one.
So that's weird. And then I mean, yeah, the next Dragon Quest 4 comes out and they are I mean, it's you think that there's really nothing wrong with it cuz it's a full functioning place. But
Right.
then when you go 5, it's like, oh, it kind of looks it's the same place, but it's not what I remember in 4. And like you said,
Hmm.
6 is probably when it actually starts. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot. I think there's a lot to that theory, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. But my overall opinion of Dragon Quest 3, I would have to say that I really liked it, especially because it was one of these games where it was really, really big and it was really, really non-linear. So like after you got past a certain point, you can kind of like go wherever you want. And the nice thing about it was there was a lot of replayability to this game that I really, really loved.
Sure,
And
it's anything
even
for the
though the story
classes.
was, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I said if anything, because of the classes.
Right, yeah. And even though the story was a little bit like it kind of like there wasn't a focus after you beat after you got out of Alahan. There
Mhm.
pretty much was like kind of like you did stuff all around the world, and you can hear a little bit about Baramos and maybe a little bit about Ortega, but nothing really like, hey, he just he did some bad stuff and all this, except for that one, the ghost town or whatever.
Yeah.
But the story other than that, it's kind of like typical, like, yeah, you're the hero, you gotta go beat the bad guy, he's gonna destroy the world. But like the twist, like this game had a lot of different things in it that as a person who played RPGs for a long, long time, was like I saw a lot of firsts in this game. Like, the first
Yeah.
time you fought in like a pyramid, kind of like a new area, and they had different like dungeon music, and then like you fought on a ghost ship, and there was different music,
Day night.
and let's see, there were other places where they had like all different types of music. It was really good, and so overall, I really, really liked this game, especially because again, it was like this is probably like after this game and after the fourth game, they pretty much knew how to make a Dragon Quest game where it's like, all right, here's the components you need to make a good Dragon Quest game.
Yeah.
And I think that this game had a good sense of it because it was able to take all the abilities from the other three characters in Dragon Quest 2
Mhm.
and be able to make it even like more expansive. Like how you had the hero who was like the tank and he had big arm, a lot of armor, a lot of weapons, really strong, but he didn't have any spells. And then the
Right.
other two were like conglomerates of magicians and clerics. Well, in this game they took a better role of that and pretty much like made everybody their own thing, which is really cool.
Mhm. No, I agree with that, and also to add to things that again that they would use more is also the day and night system, which I'm a
Right,
big
yeah.
fan of. But you're right. I definitely changed my tune when I started really looking back at Dragon Warrior 3.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's going that far up, and I'm not even saying it's a top 3, but I certainly believe that it is something that at the very least a lot of features will carry on through the series that were very important, and a lot of creative things as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Like having the bird, like having Ramia the bird after collecting a bunch of stuff, like being able to have that reward to go anywhere you wanted, fly anywhere you want on the overworld, which was amazing. Plus, I
yeah,
mean, just the music in itself was really, really great.
no, definitely. And
I can never fault a Dragon Quest music on or a Dragon Quest game on their music because it's
mm,
always very good.
yeah, and especially and as we're gonna get into Dragon Quest 4, they do a good job of actually having different music for different chapters. Because I can tell you right now, I'm gonna probably talk a lot about the music of Dragon Quest 4 when
Oh
when
yeah.
we start getting to that.
Oh yeah.
We're guys. We're gonna have a very special. I'm not going to announce it now because I don't really have it that finalized. But we're doing Dragon Quest 4, but it's going to be in a different kind of format. That's all I'm going to say for now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, Dragon Warrior 3. It's nice to look at the trilogy that started
It's pretty.
it
It's
all.
very good. It's like. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say it's kind of like nine, but like, I mean, you know how nine. You're the one main character, and then you gotta recruit three buddies. This is
Yeah.
pretty much where that started.
Right. The
Yeah.
one thing I was going to say to you also is your description, how like there's no real the description of like kind of gameplay, like oh yeah, there's Baramos, but it's not like he's a constant, like with exception of a few places, but you mostly do what you want. To
Mm-hmm.
be honest with you, what the format reminds me of, and Dragon Warrior 3 came out way before this. Uh, Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, which I did a show
Mm-hmm.
with a few weeks ago with Dungeon Master 201, and when you said that, I was like, this is exactly when me and him went over the Skyrim plot. Is like we were saying, well, it's really you can do whatever, but every once in a while you'll get that main story.
Yeah.
So if I'm willing to say actually, if people like Skyrim, they might like this format because it's
Yeah.
almost exactly the same thing as far as just a different characters and a different world.
Mm-hmm.
Have you played Skyrim at all?
Yeah, I played a little bit of it, and it's pretty fun.
Well, no,
It's like a nice immersive world similar to this, but like on a much smaller scale. You know?
right. Well, that's what I was gonna say. Do you agree with me where the formats are pretty similar to each other?
Yeah, because it's like there's the bad guy, and he's like the main guy you're gonna end up fighting, but it's not like he's a threat. It kind of reminds me a little bit. I mean, it doesn't remind me, but I can kind of compare it to like if you ever played like Final Fantasy IV, where Golbez is always bugging Cecil. Always, he's like always in his grill about like, oh, I'm gonna beat you, do this and that, and
Right.
and he's like a constant annoyance on Cecil or whatnot. In this game, it's kind of like the looming evil is Baramos, and then eventually Zoma, and it's like. That's what you got to do. So you
Right.
eventually get there, but there's all this other stuff that you can do before you get there.
Right. All right, Pete. So let's say, unless you have something else to add, let's say our final goodbyes. Where can people find you and all that good stuff?
People can go to YouTube and they can just type in Kenshin1913 and they'll find all my stuff. If you go on Twitter at Kenshin1913 or Facebook at Kenshin1913, I'm there and you can check me out there.
And like I said to everyone, we are doing Dragon Quest / Warrior 4, but it's going to be it's under a different format than we did these first three, and for good reason. But stay updated to the website at that'spodcasting.com or on Twitter with me at JimBoyStar, and you'll get some updates. I don't know, probably within a couple of weeks on that particular show. All right, everyone. You have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.